Sixth time is the charm.
Probably won't be for this
Probably won't
camera.
be. Life is suffering. That's what the Buddhists tell us. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. Oh, anyway, I forgot. We should do a clap to
Okay.
synchronize the. So I'm gonna count down, and you just clap when I say one. No,
Okay.
three, two, one, clap. On clap. All
Okay.
right. Three, two, one, clap.
I think I clapped a little early, but isn't it
Okay.
for syncing like my own video to my own audio anyway?
It can be easy. It's nice to do it so I can
I see.
also whatever. It doesn't matter. Okay. Um. Yeah. Anyway, fifth time, sixth time's a charm. How are you doing on this
Well, it's
lovely
morning
morning in
for
Dallas?
me. Yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty good. Um, yeah, my name is Ben Hopkins. I am a game dev.
Excellent.
Um,
Cool.
This is the podcast series
I
100
love
Game
it.
Devs.
You're in the right place.
Yeah, I feel like I have
Uh.
to intro the podcast if you're not going to.
Oh,
Now
that's
maybe you're
okay. We
gonna
don't need an
splice that
intro.
in. I don't know. Okay,
Um.
Um,
It's good to have your voice on my now podcast. Uh.
yes, excellent. Well, hopefully we can replace my failed camera image with my screen at some point. Maybe that'll
Yeah.
work. That should be nice. We can check
Oh,
out
I'm
this
not even
game that
recording in
you.
OBS. Oh, I am recording. That's great. Um.
Yeah, we could check out this game that you wanted to see.
Anyway, yeah. Well, I was going to talk about your background though, and like I don't know your
Okay.
path, your game dev
Yeah, I could talk a little
path.
bit about that. Um,
Um.
if you
Yeah.
really want
I
to start
mean,
from
the
the
first thing I
beginning, you'd
remember
have to,
is
yeah.
yeah. You have to go back in time.
Well, you'd have to start from
uh,
like probably like middle school.
Mystic
I think
Melee.
I
Oh.
well even before that. I don't know
Okay.
how
Okay. No. No.
long of
Tell
a
me.
path
No.
you
I
want to
don't.
go on.
Yeah, I do remember you were
Um,
doing something in C++, right, or something in high school. I don't. Yeah. I don't. Yeah. Tell me. I have bits and pieces of it.
well, I probably actually started getting into games with this software called well, it wasn't there's a software called Click and Play, and I had like this
Hmm.
version of it which is called Multimedia Fusion. It was kind of the sort of thing where you had like an Excel spreadsheet of how objects would interact with each other. So you'd have like a bullet column and a unit column or a unit row, and like you click on the intersection of those to figure out what happens when those things collide.
Hmm.
So it was really like a
Collision
kind of
matrix.
proto
Very
visual
cool.
programming, I think. Yeah. I don't know if I maybe I shouldn't be calling it visual programming, but it was definitely programming without entering text into a notepad,
Hmm.
which I think was pretty advanced for I don't know what year that was, probably like 2003 or
Yeah, and
something.
you were
I'm
like
sure the
14 or something.
yeah. So,
Yeah.
which I don't think is very early to get started with programming
No, definitely
for
not.
kids these days, but maybe in
These
our
days.
days.
Back in my day. No, just
Maybe
kidding.
back in
We
my day
only
it
had
was
click and
probably
play.
yeah. uh, so that's probably how I got started with games, and yeah, I did some gaming stuff. I mean, I just went to college for computer science, and I did some independent study at college where I
Hmm.
worked on making a simple game or two. Um,
So they just give you time, like it was like a class, but you could just do whatever you wanted, or how does that work?
yeah, essentially, there was a professor that I guess liked me that was happy to endorse an independent study where I made a game for a semester,
That's
um,
cool.
which is not really enough time to make a full game, right? But
Yeah.
I mean, maybe
Hey, hey,
it
we
was
can
enough
make it in two
time.
weeks now, or 2 days.
No, you're right. It was enough time to
No, no,
make the
I
game.
know what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah, on that level for sure. Um, but yeah, I think like my goal at that time was to make a game and release it on like the Xbox Live Arcade,
Hmm.
um, which was probably a little bit too difficult for me during that semester because I think that the games on Xbox Live Arcade actually were pretty polished, even though it was like kind of the first time or one of the first times indie games were becoming available on console, um, they were
What was
pretty
hard
like
about it?
high
Was it
quality.
like,
Like imagine like making braid or something. Um,
yeah, was it like figuring out like the signing and the uh all the like overhead
I
with
think
lo-
just like the level of polish you'd expect from
I
a
see, I see,
game at that point. Like you'd probably have your own artists and like you'd have like a team of people, um,
I
like
see.
professional artists and professional programmers, and that was just learning
So they
computer science
had
in school.
they had like standards that they would enforce, or just you just didn't think it was worth trying.
I just don't know if anyone could just throw their stuff up there. Yeah, I think that you had to be approved. But I'm not actually sure. I don't think I really got to that point.
Hmm.
So I wasn't like
Hmm.
failing to get my game on. Um, but yeah, so yeah, and then like, I was working just normal software engineering stuff for a while, and then I made this 2D platformer game, which I'm pretty happy about, but it's like, yeah, I'm probably not going to finish it for various reasons that I'm not going to get into. But but it was a good learning experience. I coded it with C++ plus plus and this library
Right.
SFML, which is very similar to SDL, if anyone's heard of that. So it's kind of like a fairly thin layer over OpenGL um, to assist with just 2D sprite-based graphics. Um,
Yeah.
so I definitely developed some pixel art skills making that game and making games in the past. And more recently, I've moved on to Unity and developed skills with Blender, which I think is pretty fun. So I've kind of gotten into this kind of specific visual style where I like to make low poly models in Blender and texture them with pixel art, uh,
Hmm.
which I think is
Yeah.
becoming a little bit more popular these days. So that's cool to see.
Yeah. I
Um,
think when you first showed me, I had never seen that before, and now
Now you're
there's
seeing it
like
in lots of games.
bigger
Yeah.
bigger indie games that have it. Yeah, it's pretty cool. I
Yeah.
wanted to go
I
back
think
to
it provides a crisp. Yeah, anyway, yeah, go ahead.
the pixel art. Was that like the aesthetic that you really were interested in at the time, or is that like something you just felt like was more achievable given your skills for
I
Mystic Melee?
definitely felt like it was achievable, but I also uh I do like pixel art. I think it's good for certain kinds of games, specifically when you want uh the interactions to be really discrete, I guess. Like
Hmm.
if you want your hitboxes to match up really nicely. I mean, oftentimes you want your hitboxes to be smaller than the object anyway. So or smaller or larger, depending on if it's like a player attack or the player itself. Like you want to be very generous towards uh, what the player is feeling. Like you don't want them to feel like they're getting hit when they shouldn't be. But
Right.
even if your hitboxes don't line up exactly with like the borders of your pixel art, I think that you can get the sense over after playing a game for a while of like where they are, and it makes it feel very reproducible in a way that I always had more trouble with in like a platformer that has like a 3D character running around.
Hmm.
Um, like those always feel. I don't know if it's just because they're often programmed in a more floaty way, but to me they don't feel as good to play usually. Um, it just feels better when like the feet of your are sprite guy or girl are just like flat on the ground. Um,
Yeah.
like
I mean, it's
pixel
literally
perfect. Yeah,
gonna be yeah, it's gonna be more discreet with pixels
yeah.
and like distinct on which where you are, and yeah, it makes sense. I
So I
imagine the
like
math
that
is
for
much easier.
platformers.
Yeah.
Uh, Actually, it's kind of harder sometimes
Oh, really?
because well, you have to worry about like potentially like the things lining up, like especially if your game is not, it's like running on a resolution. You have to make the decision in a modern pixel art game of like what resolution you're going to show the art at and what resolution you're actually going to run the game at.
I
So
see. I see.
like Mystic Melee generally is scaled up like 3x if you're playing at like 1080p. Uh, it's like actually running the game, or like the pixel art's gonna be like 640 by 360 or whatever. Um,
Are you
but
saying there might be
yeah,
like times where the game registers a hit or something, but visually it looks like you didn't hit, or like that kind of
not
thing?
really. It's like whether or not you want to have like the character be able to um, show up in between the other pixels. Like, should the pixels of the character not line up with like the pixels of the ground or the background
I see, I see, I
because
see.
the character is like in between? Because your actual physics
Yeah,
engine is probably running at a higher resolution. I mean,
I
it's
see,
running
I see.
with like float values anyway. So, um, yeah,
It's like whether you
it's
want to have continuous movement or
yeah,
discrete movement or something like that.
and that depends on your physics engine too. Like, if you
Hmm.
coded your own thing that works with integers or something
Right.
for screen or like positions, then
Good luck.
you yeah, well you wouldn't have to deal with that or like yeah,
Yeah.
it all depends. But like I so one of the things Mystic Melee did was use Box 2D for physics, which was pretty cool for having like stuff bounce around the screen.
As a
Um,
library, or what is Box 2D? A technique?
yeah, it's a no, it's a library. It's just a 2D physics library, and a lot of games use it, especially like back before this sort of thing. Like I think that Unity might actually have Box 2D as
Hmm.
its. No, probably not. They probably just use like a 2D version of physics for their 2D physics. But there was some game engine that like just integrated Box 2D. It's like it was very common back in like the I don't know 2014, 2015. Um,
Hmm.
but yeah, so I don't know. That's kind of been my path.
Yeah.
And these days I'm working on these. I have a few projects in Unity, but I've also made a bunch of game jam games, and I think we want to
Right.
talk about one of those today. You were interested in hearing about one of those.
I actually want to ask first about. I
Yeah.
remember. I feel like there's been a number of like fairly non-trivial development you've done in games that have never even made it into like itch.io, or like there's like I remember there was one where like there's a robot and he's like flying forward.
Oh
Uh,
yeah,
it
yeah.
was
That was one
like
of my very first
you
like
can
experiments in Unity. But yeah.
yeah, like whatever happened to that game?
Uh, hmm. I mean, I just stopped
Was that
working
for
on it
a
because I
game jam or
it was originally for a game
okay?
jam. Yeah. Like it was definitely one of the first things like probably at that point I didn't know enough of Unity to like make a game in a weekend in Unity, which
I see, I see.
I think I was probably attempting
You
to
need two
do.
weekends. Yeah,
Yeah, something like that. So,
just kidding.
yeah,
Got it.
so
Yeah. Okay. And there was
yeah,
also like
so
an RTS game that looked
yeah,
really
the
cool
RTS
too.
game was like that was the problem with that game was I like could not figure out exactly how the mechanics should work. So I kind of kept
Hmm.
on uh iterating with different forms of like it was a kind of card game plus RTS game. Uh, and it was never really meant to be an RTS, but it has like, it had to have all the features of
That's right.
units running around a map and like uh, pathfinding, real-time movement and target acquisition and all that kind of stuff. Um, with
Yeah,
like
that's
a
right. The
card
RTS
game.
stuff was I think an earlier version of it. Maybe you were showing me like the terrain traversal or something, and it
Yeah, I
was more like
definitely
an
showed you that
RTS,
stuff.
like StarCrafty, and then at the end, I guess
Yeah,
it was more
yeah.
of like a real time.
Well, the idea behind the game was that you had this deck of cards, and playing the cards would drop units onto your board, and you could have a card that tells all your units to start attacking or tell them all to start defending. And basically, there's an analogous AI on the other side of this terrain that's sending units at you. Um,
Hmm.
and so you're kind of playing Slay the Spire, that kind of roguelite card game, but you're throwing your cards at these units on a battlefield to tell them like how to move or give them buffs. Um, and telling them how to move was like very basic. You weren't like telling them to go from point A to point B. You were telling them to like back up or to
Mm-hmm.
uh, go forward to attack the enemies. You could tell them to like focus fire on a target enemy. So my goal with that was kind of to have all of the actions that the player took be through pulling cards onto the screen, which was kind of I thought that was like an elegant way of doing it. But
Yeah, that's
yeah, I
cool.
couldn't like it was very hard to balance, I think, like the flow of combat because RTS is so um like once you have one more unit than your enemy, it just kind of snowballs from there. Um,
Mm,
so there are ways to fix that, like usually through like defensive structures and
I see.
bonuses,
I see.
but yeah, like
Interesting.
it was tricky, and I think that like looking back on it, it would have been much better to just figure out how it could work in a more board game like setting. Um, and the games have done this
Mm,
by now too. Um, there's a lot of different variations on the roguelike card game genre, some of which intersect a little bit with RTS kind of stuff.
mm. So, so you didn't finish your Yu-Gi-Oh mixed StarCraft
Yeah,
game,
yeah.
uh,
But also
but
that was
that's
like
fine.
a huge learning
Right.
Unity step
Right.
for me. Just kind of following through with that for a while. Um,
Yeah. And then next, you worked on Skyjunk, or is that right?
yeah. I have this game called Skyjunk, which I will finish sometime because I really like the concept, and it's kind of I mean, I've kind of decided that the type of game I'm gonna work on for the near future is just a roguelite kind of action game. Um, so that's what Skyjunk is. You're kind of a, I don't know how to describe. It's like a little bit of a steampunk universe. It's maybe a bit more like jetpunk
Hmm.
or something. I mean, I think
Yeah,
that
it's like a
the
Studio Ghibli kind of
yeah,
vibe
the
too.
visual aesthetic is inspired by like yeah, the colors of
Solar punk
Studio
or yeah.
Ghibli and solar punk stuff and uh, some people liken the character to it, the characters from Attack on Titan because
Oh
he
yeah, the
has
omnidirectional whatever
yeah, he has
thing.
a grappling
Yeah.
hook arm, which is not the
Right.
same
Right.
obviously as that series, but it does feel a little bit steampunk just because of
Yeah.
the sounds,
I
I
guess
guess.
anything that has a hook shot or like a grappling hook or whatever now will be like compared
Yeah,
to Attack on Titan in some
yeah,
form.
exactly, exactly.
It's like
Uh,
impossible to not be
I,
compared now.
yeah, I think this used to be more of a pet peeve for me that like if you had like so I had like a character in Mystic Melee who's bald, right? And like people would
Hmm.
just say like, "Oh my God, that's One Punch Man. That's Saitama."
Hmm.
I'm like, I don't know what that is,
You're like,
but like,
how'd you
yeah, I
know?
guess
No.
my guy is bald and has a cape. Uh, although more recently I've actually watched that series and I think it's quite good. But
Yeah.
but yeah, it's funny that gamers will like attach like the most superficial similarity between like a game character and some series, like
Yeah.
some media piece they really like, and
Yeah.
say like these are the same thing, um, which used to kind of bother me. Like, but I actually think it's a good thing. It's not a
Hmm.
bad thing to remind people of stuff that they like, obviously.
Yeah.
So
I mean, as long as nobody thinks that you were like actually trying to copy their
exactly,
aesthetic
yeah,
or something.
yeah,
I mean, being bald is like a pretty common life experience for men.
yes, yeah,
So
definitely.
like, and a lot of characters have
Well,
capes. So
yeah,
or
exactly.
anyway, yeah.
Yeah. So so I don't know. That game
But yeah, so
Skyjunk is
yeah.
it's very so like yeah, it's kind of it's a third person shooter. I'd say it looks a bit like I'm aiming for it to play a bit like Risk of Rain 2,
Hmm.
the 3D one. I don't know if you've played that before, but
I have. I think I
yeah,
bought it
it's
on your recommendation.
oh nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Yeah, I think that's kind of like the template for that game, but with more of a focus on movement and also random map generation. So that's another
Mm.
running theme in some of the games I'm working
Yeah,
on is
I've noticed
uh,
that. Yeah.
random map generation because I think it's fun, and also I don't love putting levels together by hand. So
Mm.
so I'd rather rely on some of my programming skills and just like the fun of trying to get procedural generation to work.
Yeah, I'm
Um,
curious. I actually feel like I'd be interested in hearing about this. Like,
mhm.
I mean, I feel like I've picked up a few techniques from doing my own development. Some of them from you. I'm curious if you like have discovered if there's anything in procedural generation related to maps that you feel like are like really like themes, like recurring themes, or like um, there's like this idea of like complexity from simple set of rules. Like, is there anything like that, like akin to that, that you've like sort of found with procedural generation,
Hmm.
or like, yeah, like what would you, if you had like a apprentice, what would be like the first two or three things that you would tell them about it?
I think that I mean for procedural generation, I think it really comes down to the game design. Uh, like the point of procedural generation should be, I think, to make the game feel different to play each time you're playing on a new generated map, right? Like if it's just the same gameplay but like a slightly different looking setting, I don't think it's really achieved its goal.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I
So
think
the mechanics have to
I,
like
yeah,
work together to
yeah,
create like a unique, like if you have procedural generation, you should also have like power ups or something that makes it so that it's not just like the mountain is on the left instead of the right, but something more
right.
like
I mean that's probably what I think of first is like a civilization style game. So I really like the Civ series, and I think that's part of the reason why I like procedural generation is that those like you can play that game many times and it feels different because of the layout of the terrain is
right.
different. Um, and like
Yeah, you sort
I
of
think often about how it's like one of the proto roguelite kind of games in a way. Um,
mm,
like there weren't many like if it, yeah, it's like a run-based game. I like run-based games, especially
mm.
when they have procedural generation to make them feel different in each run. Um,
Yeah, I never thought of that. That's
so
cool.
so I think that that game does a great job of making the procedural generation matter through its game mechanics. Like the procedural generation itself is pretty simple, right? It's like some I mean, it depends on
Right.
how well they're like trying to simulate plate tectonics or whatever. But
Yeah. I mean, they literally give you like
ultimately,
options
yeah,
to trigger yourself. So
yeah,
it's
yeah,
like,
exactly.
yeah.
Ultimately, it's like some layers of Perlin noise most of the time, or like
Right.
layers of
Right.
Perlin noise would introduce the same amount of variation that like a complex plate tectonics simulation would. So, in terms of like how much depth it adds to the gameplay, so yeah, it's really the gameplay mechanics that like make that procedural generation work to make it feel different to play uh, two games as the Babylonians, even though you're
Right.
like you're playing the same
Ben's
Civ.
favorite
But
civilization.
I don't know what my favorite civilization is. Probably not the Babylonians, but
I was always more of a
yes.
Gandhi myself.
I don't know. Yeah, I wasn't really into the whole like Gandhi meme where he nukes everybody. I think that's
I always thought it was hilarious. He just has such a like scowl when you face him. He says the meanest. Gandhi's such a meanie. Um, yeah. Um, but I know what you mean though. Like I think actually when I was trying to write a game earlier this year or last year, this was something that I sort of was trying to distill was like Minecraft is sort of similar too, right? Like even though it's randomly generated, you develop this like feeling about the place. And I think Civilization is like that too, where it's like this is my island, or like this is my part of the territory. Oh, like that's like where I started the first capital. Like you develop like nostalgia, or even RimWorld 2, which I one of my favorite games. I,
Yeah, yeah.
you like develop this like ongoing nostalgia with the like the random world. Um, yeah,
Yeah,
that's
I
cool.
agree. That's like something that you've got to, that's very important to try to capture in procedural generation. I think that that requires you to think about like generating stuff on a macro scale and a micro scale. Like
Hmm.
in a Civ game, you have to think about like the shape of continents maybe when you're generating them, because that's probably what our minds might think of when we have a sense of place. Um,
Right.
or like have a whole region of a continent covered in rainforest or desert. Like those are the kind of like if every tile was just randomized completely,
It looked
it would
terrible.
yeah, it would look
Yeah.
terrible and it would
Well,
be very hard to
yeah.
have a sense of place. So
Right.
no matter like so in Skyjunk for example, uh, like you see floating islands is what it generates, and some of them might have more structures on them, and some of them might be more naturalistic. Uh, some of them might have like more well-defined or like more memorable shapes. Um, so, like thinking about those macro details, like I guess like so you might randomize a map and have like a setting that at a very high level says we're gonna have like one very large landmass and then like two very small ones. Uh, that map will feel very different when that setting gets randomized to have like five tiny islands, and like a
Hmm.
bunch of scattered debris. Like if your randomizer, if your maps can be that varied, that helps a lot to make you feel like there's like a sense of place um, in a procedurally generated game.
Yeah.
So that's where I would go with that.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm really excited to see what Skyjunk. The last time you showed me over a desktop screen share, Skyjunk level generation was pretty cool. And it seems like you brought that into your current game, um,
Yeah, my
which is
current game,
based
which
on
yeah was
Malagris, right?
based on a game called Malagris, which I made for a game jam um, with a lot of other people. So credit to the team for their contributions with art and music and stuff. Um, but yeah, this is like a game, a sort of horror
Yeah.
game where you get chased by this large monster while you're trying to assemble some artifacts so that you can get through. It's kind of like a Metroidvania in the way that you have to like get some artifacts um, to bypass obstacles. But it's very small because it's just like a game jam game. Um,
Yeah.
so I'm
It's
kind
so
of really
scary
just
though.
taking that aesthetic. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's
There's
really
this.
scary.
I definitely put a lot of thought into how to make the monster AI work well, and also just like the visual and sound effects for the monster, and stuff like screen shake. Like I definitely tried to juice the interactions with this monster a lot, because they're very large. Like
Yeah.
basically like stomping near you, like the whole screen starts shaking, and they're much faster than you. So you kind of have to outwit them by going around corners and stuff. Um, so yeah, that worked out very well, and I'm gonna try to carry some of that into this new game that I'm mostly basing off the aesthetic of Malagry. With the aesthetic really just being like PSX, maybe slightly more advanced, like graphical style, um, kind of gothic.
Hmm.
Uh, so I'm thinking about calling that game Ballistic Arcana. I'm not sure if you have any
Hmm.
thoughts on that name.
I'll have to think
Very,
about it.
yeah, you can think about it. Very, very working title, but I kind of want it to be descriptive of it. So it's more of like a standard like roguelite first-person shooter this time, but another like
Hmm.
roguelite action game. So that's like what I'm trying to get good at making because I feel like I know what makes those games fun. Um, so Yeah, in this game, I mean, it's kind of similar to Skyjunk in a lot of ways. So I like pulled a lot of code from that project, and also I'm gonna be able to backport a lot of this code to that project, hopefully. So
Oh,
yeah, you're like
what do you
gathering
mean?
guns, just like a lot of the code for figuring out, or for like roguelite kind of item collection and interactions with enemies, like in an action game. Um,
Oh,
all that
okay,
kind of
okay,
stuff
got it.
can hopefully be somewhat shared. Uh, but yeah, this game is more of a like a first-person shooter roguelite, maybe a bit more like Gunfire Reborn, if you've heard of that. I think I've told you to get that.
Hmm.
I'm not sure if you've played it yet.
Yeah, I.
Um,
That's right. I haven't played that. That's not the Chinese one, is
it
it?
is, yeah, yeah. I think it's a Hong
Oh, it
Kong
is.
dev
Okay,
team. Um,
okay, that's right.
yeah, it's a very fun game. It's like animals. You're playing as
Yeah,
like cats and dogs and birds and turtles,
yeah. That one gives me
and
a
you're shooting a
real
lot of guns.
Overwatch vibe.
Yeah, yeah, it must be definitely
Yeah.
inspired by Overwatch. I think it's also inspired by Borderlands. I think it's really close to Borderlands in a lot of ways.
That's
In
right.
that like
That's right. Yeah, the game's pretty cool.
the guns have like their own randomized attributes when you pick them up. So
Right,
you're
right,
like kind of looking for that gun that has a nice combination of attributes and then kind of synergizing with your scrolls that you pick up. You pick up these scrolls that give you your character different abilities, like, every time you reload, you fire faster for 3 seconds or whatever.
right.
Um,
Anyway, we don't have to talk about
yeah,
that
yeah.
game too much.
Okay, okay. Um,
uh, yeah,
yeah,
but yeah, that's a cool game though.
yeah,
Yeah,
it is. Uh, so I don't know. Yeah, so I'm working on that game. We'll see. Hopefully, I'm gonna put out like a nice demo in October. That's
yeah,
that's my
that
goal
would
at
be
the moment.
cool.
But
Okay, and the last game I remember you worked on, besides the game we worked on together, was Dropchute, right? Is that the only other game of recent
uh,
times?
yeah, I guess so. There've been a few other Unity 3D
Oh,
like
okay.
uh game jam games in there, but yeah, Dropchute, I'm really happy with that game. It's a 3D interpretation of Downwell, um, which was made for a game jam where you're really supposed to wear your inspiration on your sleeve, I'd say, be inspired by another game, um,
Hmm.
or not necessarily another game, but just another thing. Um, so this game, I really tried to like just translate everything from Downwell into 3D, including like the designs for the enemies and the guns, um, and try to kind of stay true to what made that game unique, which I think was the sort of weightiness to your character,
Hmm.
and the fact that you only use the controls are really simple. Like you jump and shoot were just one button. Um, so I carried that over to my game, and I also didn't allow you to use the right analog stick as you normally would in a first-person shooter to be able to look.
Hmm.
So all the camera work was done automatically, depending on whether or not you were standing on the ground or whether or not you were in the air or looking over a, a ledge. So
Yeah.
so that was like a fun challenge, and I enjoyed yeah, how it turned out because I think it's pretty punchy like the original game. I was trying to go for that same style of like a little bit lo-fi uh, visual effects and sounds.
Right.
And yeah, it feels pretty good to play, and like you just kind of increase speed as you fall further in this well, and you're trying to hit enemies and get your combo higher in order to earn more energy and more health and more gems, so that you can spend on more health and energy at shops,
Right.
basically.
Right.
Um,
Such is life.
yeah, so that helps you get a little bit further. So it's just like a little bit of strategy, and really just the same strategy there is in Downwell.
Right.
And the creator of Downwell thought it was really cool, so that was
I know.
nice.
I was just gonna say, maybe you saw it too. Like that. I think yeah. My biggest tweet is like talking about your game, and like I think yesterday it got like another retweet. Like
Oh, I didn't
six
see
months
that.
later, it's
Yeah,
like
yeah.
still going like making the rounds on Twitter. It's like people love Downwell, and they love like I don't know. I think a lot of people agreed that it was like a really true interpretation of Downwell into 3D. It was super cool.
I'm really glad, yeah, that people felt that way. Yeah, yeah, so that was cool. People liked it on the Downwell Reddit too. I posted it there. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, so that was like, it's cool to make a fan game sometimes because, like, yeah, you get a lot of people to just care about what you made. Um,
Right. It's like one of
so,
the biggest, easiest strategies on Twitter on how to like
yeah, yeah,
get big is like just like scratch someone else's back and like
yeah.
lip service for someone
Yeah,
who's
that's
already big.
true. That's true. Although I don't know if like I mean I think the Twitter is nice for connections, and I should use
Mm.
it a lot more than I do. But I don't think it's like important to get big on Twitter in terms of like being a good or successful game dev. But
Oh yeah, yeah. No, I agree. I agree.
but yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So this is a game called 10 Minutes to Y2K, which I made with a bunch of other people, including let me actually get the list to make sure I don't forget anybody or anyone's like full
Wait, were
name.
there more than two other people?
Yeah, yeah. There was
Oh, okay.
Boz, uh, who approached me with like the idea for this game basically, and he was really the um, game designer and also the
Hmm.
UI designer. Uh, Cohill, his friend, and some of these, yeah, these people are like some of them are part of Boz's like kind of regular game jam team, as far as I
Hmm.
understand. Uh, worked on the title screen and icons, and yeah, and then Haber works on the music, and I know the three of them are working on this game together called Twilight Tower, which I think you've
Right.
played as well, which is very cool. Um,
Yeah.
I
Very
recommend
cool.
checking
Yeah.
that out. Uh, and then Edward Newton worked on some additional programming during the game jam,
That's
and
right.
John DeLeon worked on sound effects. So yeah, this game is like a. Let me see if I can stream it. Yes. Do you see the game?
I I see it. Very
Okay.
cool.
So yeah, this is Cohill's illustration. So the game is what is the genre called? It's like a Vampire Survivors like game. Um,
Mm.
the genre has a name now. I think it might be like Idle Survivor or something. Um,
Hmm.
I'm not sure if that's right,
Imagine
but
creating a game that creates its own genre, or like
yeah, I mean it wasn't the
that's
first.
like
There was like a an iPhone or like a mobile
I
game
see.
that was very similar that had been around for quite a while, and I'm sure that game was similar to other games. I think so. Yeah, it's like a Vampire Survivors idle uh, surviving idle survivor game. I think is what they're calling it now. But yeah, this
Hmm.
game spawned like a whole little genre of fairly cheap games on Steam, um, where you're running around a 2D plane uh, with abilities or weapons that fire automatically uh, on some kind of cooldown usually. Um, and it's a great type of game to play as a streamer, I think, which is a big part of its success. Like people can play the
Hmm.
game while talking to their audience and stuff because you don't have to. There's not a lot of really time sensitive inputs. Although it
Yeah.
does get like pretty difficult at some parts of the game, but it's doesn't take quite as much attention to play, and yet it's got this casino like aspect to its visuals and sounds, which is I don't know if you read this, like the developer of Vampire Survivors originally worked as a developer for like casino games. Um,
No, I didn't know that.
so he applied some of
Wow.
his knowledge from that field to Vampire Survivors and how to make it juicy and fun. And like when you get a chest in that game,
Mm,
like the whole screen blows up with confetti and stuff. So, um,
yeah. Well, that's a good place to learn that skill. Is
yeah,
like
exactly.
that's all you gotta do is add loot boxes and you're good. You basically
Yeah,
got a gambling game.
yeah, it's true. Um, so yeah, this game is named 10 Minutes to Y2K, which is sort of a cheeky reference to this game called 20 Minutes Till Dawn, I believe, which I haven't played. I know Boz had played it. Um, and it's like another take on Vampire Survivors that has been pretty popular. Um,
Hmm.
so these screens are describing our upgrade system. And it's a little complicated. I'll explain it to you a little bit on this screen. Um, so we made this game originally for the GMTK Jam, which had a theme of uh, what was it called? Roll the die or roll the dice, I think.
Hmm.
So our game was actually originally named defrag.die, and we decided to change it to something that was like a little bit uh, more descriptive and less tied to the game jam afterwards. But
Hmm.
yeah, so we do like this mechanic that, and Boz came up with this way to use the dice to allocate your weapons and upgrades.
Right.
So
I like it a
um,
lot. Yeah, it's a cool mechanic.
yeah, it's very it like looks a little bit overwhelming at first, which I think is the only downside is that this screen, the first time you look at it, is like,
Hmm.
what the hell is going on?
Right.
But
That's how I felt as well.
those tutorial images helped a lot. And like
Yeah.
I wasn't really showing them, but yeah, it's pretty simple once you figure it out. You have like these three dice at the bottom to allocate, and you're trying to figure out like which weapon you want and then which upgrade you want. And some of the upgrades clearly synergize with the weapons. Um, and the weapons also synergize with each other in certain ways, which you kind of just have to figure out through playing the game. Um, so let's see. I'm going to try a fairly simple strategy to start out with, um, and use this overclock, which is kind of the simplest, um, one of the simpler weapons. It just fires bullets in front of you. um, so it's kind of like a
Hmm.
basic weapon for this type of game. And I'll use my number two die because that one currently is not useful at all on the upgrade side. So on the weapon side, like you can use any dice uh, you want into these slots, and you just have to get enough dice in there to add up to the cost of the
Right.
upgrade. So at the start, everything is costs two.
At least.
So
Yeah.
yeah, at least. So kind of an advanced mechanic is later in the game when it costs like 10 or something, you can throw in multiple die to get it that turn, or you can like throw in an extra die that
Right.
you have to save up for getting that in a later turn. Um, so anyway, I'll grab overclock, and then already I have uh, dies for 6 and 3, so I could choose between these two upgrades. Um, and both of these synergize with overclock, so that's like why I would consider taking that from my weapons side. Um, I'm just going to take recursion here, which increases the number of pierce, and this third die won't be necessary to use.
So I've got a question. You can yeah, you can keep playing. How does like what was the It seemed like the map was infinite, or it's not.
It's not actually. It's like it's an arena.
Okay. I guess I just couldn't.
Uh,
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
yeah, it takes
So
some time to get out there.
how does the enemy spawning work? Because I noticed like different waves had like seemed like they had different patterns.
Yes, there's a bunch of different patterns that can spawn. Actually, there's really not that many patterns. There's like large clusters of enemies. There's enemies that slowly trickle in from basically the borders of your screen over
Hmm.
time.
Hmm.
Um, I'm just going to quickly grab stuff here so we can show people what the game actually looks like. Um, and there's a wave that like spawns enemies like surrounding you basically, um, and you'll see that later. Uh, the spawn routines, yeah, they're pretty simple, but like they do make sure to not spawn in too many enemies at the same frame, uh, to make sure it doesn't like get slowed
I
down.
see.
Um,
So, so the let's say you have some clusters. Like, how do you just pick a few random points that are with like above some distance from the player and just spawn like X number into each of those, or like is it like a noise function? Like, how does that work?
uh, yeah, it's like choosing random points basically that are a certain distance away. Um,
Okay,
it's obviously it uses random function to like it just throws some random floats into sine and cosine or something. I forget to choose where
got
to
it.
around the circle to spawn things. But yeah, it's pretty simple. Um,
And then the this terrain, um, oh,
the terrain is
I
with
noticed is like a
Perlin
hexagonal.
noise. Oh yeah,
Okay,
yeah. Yeah, the hexagon math I figured out from this website. Oh, what's it called? Red Blob Games. You might have seen this before, or maybe not.
okay,
Um, but it's a pretty great website for like showing you what the math behind kind of a hexagonal grid is like. Um, so I just used my
did you actually
Bluebeard a few
need
times to use.
a hexagonal grid, or did you just uh like stagger them like like because I can imagine like one way of doing hexagonal would be to just uh it seems like there's like one layer that's sort of like there's like one line and then there's like one line of hexagons that are like sort of just offset from the first line and then like back to the original orientation.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
um
Uh, it is a real hexagon. I
I
guess
think.
I might not have
Okay,
needed
okay.
to do that, because we didn't end up using a lot of the properties of hexagonal grids in like the actual gameplay logic. Um,
Right. I was gonna say like
there is
if this
there
was like
yeah
civilization, you definitely want to
yeah exactly.
invest in that, but
There is one there is one ability which targets hexagons directly. Uh, so it kind of makes use of the
oh,
hexagonal grid. But
I see, I see.
it was more of a like I wanted the visual style, and in some ways it was easier to generate the map by having the actual
Mm-hmm.
math for like making a hexagonal grid and placing the different
Yeah, so what
yeah.
is like how is your grid represented? Like what is how do you determine
Well,
let's say you want to add this noise to like uh increase and decrease the height of certain tiles, like how does that work?
it's just an array. So, an array of like which tiles are filled and which ones are not, basically. Or yeah, because those are the only types of tiles. Um, so,
Which ones are filled and
or
which
like
ones
which
aren't?
ones are terrain. Or actually, no, sorry, it's not even that complicated. It's just a height array. Um, it's just like how tall is
Okay.
each tile. So it's 2D. It's not like a 3D hexagonal thing. Um,
There's an you said there's like a lesser an array. So at the beginning is like the bottom left tile, and then the
so
last element is like the top right, or
yes, I believe so. Um, something like that. I
okay,
mean, there's like a like yeah, I don't remember all the specifics of how
okay, that's fine, that's
the
fine.
math
I'm just
works,
really curious
but
because I've
it's pretty
yeah.
simple. I mean, I think it actually works on a it's like a 2D system where like from two numbers you can like figure out what the third number is in a hex coordinate system. Um,
Hmm.
so there's a few different ways to do this, I guess.
Okay, okay.
But yeah, I'm gonna keep upgrading
And then
Overclock. So like, but
yeah,
that
another question I had was
well, one
like
more thing on the map.
oh sorry.
So the generation of that gets baked. Uh, so it's not like a whole lot of individual game objects. because that would be pretty bad for performance, especially because I'm
Hmm.
eventually going to be really pushing the number of enemies on screen. So, uh, like segments of the map get baked into larger meshes. Um, and
I
it's
see.
nice to bake segments instead of the whole map because then some of them can be thrown out by the camera if they're off screen. Um, so yeah, so like the map, originally we were thinking like it might be cool to have the map change shape or move and stuff. But ultimately I decided it was better to have it um, get baked and not really be able to move very much,
I see.
just for
So when you
performance.
say
Yeah.
it's baked, do you mean like after you've generated it, you notice that there's like a bunch of tiles that are all flat, and so you group them together into one mesh, or is it more like you each like the map is actually made up of like larger pieces, and they're all like one each of them is like a mesh that you've like
Yes.
generated before you even played the game?
No, they're not pre-generated before I play. But when after the
Okay.
map is generated, it takes all the tiles that are within a certain range of each other, like just on the map grid, and bakes those meshes into one mesh, um,
Okay.
and into one object. So, in fact, I can actually show you really easily because
Yeah, I've never
I have the game open here.
like mesh combining is like not something that I have done before. So
Yeah, it's a very useful feature. I was doing it for some of my other procedurally generated games, so I guess I was familiar. Um,
so this doesn't muck with the material assignments, right? This is just assigning them all to like one game object as if you had like imported it from Blender or something.
yeah,
Is that right?
exactly. I mean, well, you can assign
Okay,
any
okay,
material you want to the meshes once you bake them. So like this is what a whole map
okay.
would look like. It is in fact a
Hmm.
large hexagon, the shape of the arena itself.
Very beautiful.
Yeah, yeah. So you can see when I click on this has been baked into shapes like this.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. Um, so I ended up
How do you choose? Is that just like based on the hexagonal
yeah,
grid
it's
system?
just based on the grid system. Um,
Okay, okay.
so it's just anything that's like yeah near each other in the grid. I'm sure that like if we found yeah, you can see there's like a sort of method to its madness.
Hmm.
Um,
Probably.
yeah, yeah,
No, yeah. They're like generally co-located. I get it.
yeah.
Yeah.
I actually forget what
Um,
exactly I did. It would be pretty simple to actually figure that out. Um, but yeah, I was even originally trying to use graphics draw mesh to like draw them all uh,
hmm.
with without game objects at all, but that wasn't working for some reason, and I don't remember why. Like
Hmm.
it was
I didn't
working,
even
but
know that was an
it was
option.
working, but there was some
That's cool.
drawback that I was not happy with. I think it just wasn't also like particularly performant. I think I probably would have needed to cull them manually, based like figuring out which ones were in the
Hmm.
camera, and this was just way easier. Oh, I think a big part of it also was that I actually want to use these as colliders. Like these are
Um,
mesh colliders. They don't move, so they're pretty performant. But it yeah, like I wanted the mesh for collision as well as for drawing.
hmm.
Um,
And then this underneath them is just like one quad with a shader on it, or like what is the pit of
the
despair
yes
between all
the
these hexagons?
I call it the cyber sea. So that one actually
Oh, very
that
cool.
one actually is using graphics draw mesh. So I do use that because
Oh,
I don't need any
okay.
collision. Draw mesh
Okay.
instanced, in fact. So it's drawing like a ton of quads. Because
Oh, nice.
you I believe it is. Unless I'm forgetting something. But yeah, it's just a ton of quads. So like they need to move on the z-axis. Let me,
Oh,
yeah.
I see. I
So
see.
they move like a C. Um,
Oh, okay.
so we do that.
Beautiful.
Yeah. To that's why it needs to have some geometry. And yeah,
That makes
I
sense.
think it's
Yeah,
pretty,
yeah.
and it works
It is. It is.
with Dramish instance, which makes it pretty quick. Um, yeah.
Hmm.
So let me go back to this game.
And so,
Yeah.
yeah, the weapons you have, there's some amount of dithering I noticed.
Yeah.
Um, I think there's like a style that you've sort of developed over time with like Dropchute and Skyjunk a little bit, maybe. Um,
Yeah, it's definitely
like,
a technique I developed there, but what's weird, the reason I chose to do that in this game was because of the Cyber C. Um, because the Cyber C is
hmm,
transparent, and when you try to draw two transparent things at the same time, the game engine doesn't know which one is actually on top. It just draws all transparent things at
hmm,
the same time. There's no depth. I don't fully understand
yeah,
how graphics pipeline works, but the idea is like you might end up with the ocean behind the like transparent visual effect. Um,
yeah.
so let me
That
allocate
reminds me
these.
of. Do you remember in school we'd watch videos on like quantum, like introducing us to like quantum physics and be like, if you run against a wall, you might end up in a different country or something. It's like what?
I don't remember this at all. It sounds.
Okay. I don't remember where I saw this, but it was like it's like sometimes it's weird stuff happens because quantum energy. I don't know. It's like what? Never mind.
Yeah, yeah. Maybe it's the same thing, but I don't think
Yeah.
so. uh,
No, no, no. I assume it has to do with like how they're blended together, blending modes or something. Because
yeah,
I assume it knows like the depth of each
I don't think it does
fragment. The shader
actually.
knows like the depth. So, oh, it
I
doesn't.
don't think it
Okay,
does on
maybe
the
that's the problem
transparent patch.
then.
Yeah, that's the problem.
Okay.
Um, so
All right. Never mind.
yeah, so like I originally I did have more. I mostly had alpha transparency for the visual effects, uh, but they kept
Hmm.
on getting like going behind the ocean sometimes, not all the time.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Um,
Okay. I guess I was wrong.
so
Yeah.
oh, this is really good. More projectiles, and then I want to roll something higher than a two so I can get this. Um, so yeah, so I adopted this dithering technique, which is what's it called? Like an alpha cutout, um,
Hmm.
which I learned is sometimes more resource intensive than transparency. It kind of depends on a few things. You think it would be like I often hear that it's just straight up better, but I think for Skyjunk I was trying a thing where the shaders might always be cutting out, which ended up being extremely bad for performance because they needed to basically check behind them every time, or like draw everything. Like you couldn't guarantee that something was occluded. Um,
Sorry. What is so like you're talking about doing some kind of alpha clipping or something, or no?
yeah, actually, I'll show you the shader. That should be easier.
Okay. Yeah, I'm kind of
Uh,
curious. I guess I didn't follow that completely.
yeah. So obviously these shaders are very messy because I made these for a game jam.
Yeah.
But
If they weren't made for a game jam, they'd be
yeah,
even
they'd be
messier.
pristine. Let's
Yeah, I'm
see.
sure.
Let's see. My shader for the effects, common
So
shaders.
you mentioned some technique
What do I
or
use?
something, or
So like the bullets are using FX masks, which is using FX particle. Yes, so I'll show you. It's pretty simple on this one. Um, so like uh, for the graph settings. Oh wait. Hmm. I feel like this is not the right one. So I thought I was using alpha clip threshold, um, but I'm apparently not using that.
Yeah, it looks like those are just transparent.
Yeah, it looks like these are just regular transparent effects, but clearly in the game they're not. So what, did I click on the wrong thing here?
Yeah.
I think I probably did click on the wrong thing. Uh,
Okay.
yeah, so the player bullet is using this one.
Oh, this one's got groups. You know, that must be important.
Yeah, yeah. So this is the technique. It's very simple. Uh, you're throwing a dither node into the alpha clip threshold. Um, and
Okay.
unfortunately, you can't really preview it here. Um, but basically, I'm taking the minimum of like the darkness of the color. Um, yes,
Hmm.
I'm switching this to HSV, so like the value. I'm taking the minimum of that and the alpha of the vertex color of the effect. Um, and taking one minus of that, throwing it into like the dither node. So basically, like the effect of that, the dither node is kind of similar to multiplying your value by like a screen of pixels that are dithered. So like every,
That's
it's
right.
like that dither pattern where it's probably like an 8 by 8
Yeah, it's like the X's,
grid.
right?
Yeah, yeah, it looks like
Or
a lot of
something.
X's. That is what it looks
Yeah.
like.
Yeah.
So it has the effect of like fading out pixels, like every couple of steps. Um, so as it gets darker, like more pixels will be below the alpha clip threshold or below this alpha value, and they'll just be ignored.
Hmm.
So even though this is going to be an opaque graph type, um, some of the
Hmm.
pixels will be alpha clipped out. So that's how you achieve this kind of dithered
Sorry,
look.
can
Yeah.
you uh explain to me like what's the big idea? I guess I didn't like quite follow. Like, why are you taking the minimum of like
Oh,
what is the significance of these colors coming in?
I guess the significance is just that we have our, I have like a sample texture to kind of determine the
Hmm.
look of the effect. Like, for example, I have like some, uh, like this kind of thing. It's kind of silly. It's a
Okay,
very simple texture. Uh, but like as this gets darker, I also want it to potentially fade out quicker. Um,
I
so I
see.
want to
I
take
see.
like the lightness of the pixel texture, and as that
Hmm.
gets darker, I want it to fade out quicker. The other case in which I want it to fade out quicker is when the vertex color alpha is going towards 0, because that's what you control in your particle effect. So,
Oh, okay,
like my
okay,
particle effect for this weapon is going to have color over lifetime, and the color over lifetime alpha is 0 at the end.
okay. So
Um,
that's just something you control through like a you have like a curve that
yes,
changes over.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah. So the gradient
or I guess
in the
you.
particle system, I want to
Yeah.
be able to use that to control the alpha. So that's why I throw the vertex color in here. Um,
Okay, okay, okay. The minimum, got it. Okay,
yeah,
okay, that
yeah.
makes more sense.
So I don't know if
So
like
what you said
yeah.
you're looking at the lightness
Mhm.
of the values to determine this alpha clipping. Like what this color ramp that you showed me with the green and black. Like what is the does does the do those colors have any significance, or is it just like the basically the grayscale colors that matter most?
I think that in this case I'm using the grayscale colors. Uh, those like
Okay.
yeah, those textures are probably a remnant of like some other game project, like some texture that was
Oh,
very
okay,
similar
okay,
that I
got it.
pulled in to use for this game jam. Um,
Okay, okay.
but it's like sometimes I would use the actual color from the texture. Um, in this case, I'm multiplying the texture color by the vertex color, so I don't know what I ended
Hmm.
up using. It depends on what texture I have applied here in player bullet. Um, so I use this texture. which
And
is like this bullet gradient. So you can clearly see this
okay.
is like the color of the bullets, right? Um,
Hmm.
in the game, like these uh, these yellow bullets that you'll see in a
Yeah. Can
second.
you bring up the? Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah. Sorry, bring up what?
No, I was gonna say bring up the bullet mesh, but you can also show in the game.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if the stream quality is really going to be able to show the dithering. Dithering is quite obviously gets destroyed by video compression when it's
Yeah,
like pixel
yeah.
perfect. But um, but yeah, I like the look of it. Here we've got like a big wave of dudes surrounding you. Um,
Right. So this one, this like deployment pattern or this spawn pattern is like just a circle. This is not from the edge of the game, the map, is it?
no, it's not. It's a circle around, yeah, centered around the player.
Okay. Okay. Got it. So yeah, I got a couple more questions about shaders in
Okay,
your game if you're
I'm down.
willing to respond.
Yeah, we'll
Um,
see how much I remember.
yeah.
But
So
yes.
like the so the guy's flash white. Is that like an extra material you added, or is that like a parameter in the shader that you can like tweak in code?
It is a parameter for the shader. Yes, for the shader on the enemies.
Okay. So just for that instance of the material,
Yes. So I actually use DoTween, I think, for
you just
that.
set the.
Does DoTween can
I
change a
see.
material parameter over a few frames, which I don't know if that's the most efficient way to
That's
do it,
cool.
but it worked fine. I never noticed it
Yeah, it
being
seems to work
too
okay.
bad. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Um, okay, cool. And then these little orbs, it looks like they're just like the the quads or whatever tries like blown out on the normal. Is that right, or is there something more to it?
which
I guess I also
orbs?
see like
Oh,
there's like
oh, oh, those things. Yeah, like the
these like
enemies.
yeah.
They are they're pretty much modeled like that. Yeah, I
Oh,
modeled
okay.
like an icosphere, and then I like in, basically copied it, increased the scale, and then separated them and made each triangle smaller,
Okay.
actually, in order to get this
Is
effect.
there? Oh, that makes
But
sense.
but there is
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
I think if I remember correctly, they have two materials on them, and I feel like this effect really didn't come through in game, so it probably wasn't worth spending much time on. But there's a material that kind of increases and decreases the size of the outer triangles a little bit through a shader.
Hmm.
Um, so like, yeah, we've got this virus. It looks like this. Um,
Oh, it looks much cooler up front or up close.
yeah, yeah, it does look pretty cool.
Or, I mean,
So
you
there's
can
like a
sort of see
few,
some of the detail that you put into it.
yeah, there's a few layers of triangles, and it does have this enlarged shader. Um, Maybe you can see it in the preview here, like when I slowly turn it so that it refreshes. Um, it changes size
Oh, cool.
occasionally, but
Yeah, yeah, that's
not a
cool. That's
lot.
cool. You're right. I didn't notice that in the game,
Yeah,
but
yeah, you can see
that's
it's changing
cool.
size just a bit. Um, I don't know if I should have
Yeah,
emphasized that more, but I think it's fine. Um, there's already a lot of stuff going on here.
yeah. Although maybe it's one of those things that's kind of like invisible,
Maybe I'll
and then
just
if you like removed it, maybe I would be like, the enemies are kind of like this or
yeah, yeah,
something.
you never really
Or I don't know. I don't know. Yeah, you never know.
know.
So, I don't know if this is something that you focused on more or Boz or whomever
Yeah.
on the team. What is like, so you had this idea, or like Boz had this idea, or someone had the idea for like, oh, let's make a game where you use like, you're always attacking and you use dice to upgrade. Like, how did you,
Hmm.
what was your idea for like, how did you get ideas for like how to change it, or like, you'd play the game, I assume, and be like, oh,
Yeah.
this, like, yeah, what was your process for like tweaking the game?
We had a lot of we definitely like play tested it a lot. That was like I don't know if I would say contentious, but we we spent like a lot of time going back and forth over how difficult the game should be, I think. Um,
Hmm.
I definitely wanted it to be too hard. Uh, like this is probably a much easier version of the game than what it was originally, which I think is really
Hmm.
better. Like I think you said that you beat it on your first try in this current version, which I think is
Yeah,
fine. Like because you kind
I
of
think I got lucky though.
yeah, you might have gotten lucky.
Yeah,
You might have kind of known what the game was about, which probably helped. Um, so yeah,
I kind of intuited that it made sense to upgrade over get new level one abilities every time,
right,
right?
right, right. Yeah, I think that's something that most people who had
I sort of
played
guessed on
this
that.
kind of game would get. Um, but you
Right,
also have
right,
to
right.
like, especially in the beginning, there's some like finesse to moving around. I really like that this is kind of
Hmm.
a movement game. Have you have you heard that term before? Not
What
that
is
that's like a
that?
type of game that people say, but it's like it's like the idea that you're making these like small movements and like just barely maneuvering around enemies. I think that's kind of what the concept is. So yeah, I
Hmm.
think it's probably a thing that you feel like you're doing a lot during uh, what are those games like shoot 'em up games. But
Yeah.
like you have a very fine analog
No,
control
actually,
over your character. Yeah.
there was when I played. I think it was Risk of Rain 1.
Oh
Actually,
yeah.
I think I got to a point where like I just had to move around the map and people would just die, like
Yeah, yeah.
like because I just had someone like auto like rocket shooting, or maybe I just had to hold down fire and they were just like rocket shooting off and killing everything.
Right, right.
Uh, or maybe I had like drones. I forget what it was, but like yeah, I sort of know the vibe you mean. Like you just have to like be present. You don't have to really like. It's not like you're having like precision like timing and
Right.
positioning of necessarily
Which is what makes it
the
a great game for
movement.
streaming, I guess. I mean, I think movement is really
Yeah,
referring
yeah.
to like you're just barely getting around the enemies, but also that's like the best way to play. Um, is
I see.
is
I
to
see. I
be
see.
like really close to the enemies. You're just like uh, cutting through like a gap into and like two groups of enemies, just barely making it through, and like that's
Hmm.
satisfying and also
I see.
rewarding in games like this. So
Hmm.
and that like you get more experience and stuff if you can get close to the enemies and get more of your attacks to hit them. So this is the end of the game. It's the final wave kind of thing. What I do now does not matter.
Hmm.
There's literally 1 second left in the game. And system
Hooray! You
restored.
can beat your own
Yeah,
game.
using the easiest strategy.
Yeah. I really felt like the Y2K vibe was good, and like the upgrade names I feel like were kind of that like 2000s like wow
Yeah,
like technology is cool
yeah,
kind of like whoa like you can jump into cyberspace
yeah,
like
yeah.
like green screen like low resolution green screen like PSA like PBS
Right,
or
right.
something like I don't know just like yeah like low budget 3D
Yeah,
like
that's absolutely what we were going
videos
for.
yeah
I feel
TV.
like there were some ways in which we hit it, some ways which we didn't. Like I probably should have
Hmm.
made the actual shaders for the terrain and the ocean be like simpler if I really wanted to hit that PSX and like
Hmm.
turn of the 21st century sort of feel. But yeah, the names were great. I didn't come up with very many of those. Those were yeah, my team did a really good job with the names. Um,
Hmm. The character animation's nice too, or just like the character look.
thanks.
I think is really good.
Yeah, actually, I want to show you the character because
He she sort of
I'm
just
very happy
yeah.
with them. Um,
They just sort of like run in a very like dollish, like really cute like I don't know like Hansel and
Hansel
Gretel,
and
not
Gretel.
Hansel and Gretel. Yeah, just like a fairy tale kind of like tra la 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 kind of like I don't know what it is.
Yeah, yeah, totally. Um,
As one does.
yeah, this is like a good example of kind of the graphic style I like to try to make. Um, yeah, I definitely spent a lot of time on the animations for this. Some of this was done after the jam, so
Ah,
I had some more time. I just love the
right.
slamming the keyboard with your block hands kind of thing.
Right, I saw that too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because
Right. It reminds me of like the CSI, like fake
right.
hacker kind of stuff.
I think specifically I was inspired by
Right.
what's it called? Uh, Ape Escape. There's like when you complete a level, you
Hmm.
see this cinematic where like the professor's helper is like slamming on the keyboard with her huge block hands, even bigger than these block hands. Uh,
Nice. Very
yeah,
PSXy.
it's very PSXy. I think it's very funny. So this is like I decided that would be how she's like attacking is that she's entering program
Yeah.
commands in her program wheel thing.
All right.
Yeah,
Hula hoop
yeah,
or something.
yeah.
Yeah, it's
Someone
very
mentioned
cool.
that.
And the headphones are nice. Or
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I was probably inspired by like Jet Set Radio or something for the headphones. But
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, another one of my favorite
Yeah, I can see
games.
the uh pixel art style,
Yeah,
3D pixel art style like on the face and the pants and yeah,
yeah. I didn't
it's
like
cool.
have time to put too much detail into the pixel art for the body. But I think it works out pretty well. I just like the crisp lines, I guess.
Yeah.
Although in Blender here, it kind of like looks a little bit weird. I don't know why. In motion, it like for some reason Blender blurs stuff a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But uh, but yeah, I was really happy with those animations. Uh, I'm gonna do
Cool.
a so like one of the other strategies in this game. There's like kind of three main strategies you can do, in terms of like
Mm-hmm.
upgrades and weapons that synergize with each other. Another one is this delete strategy, which is much more active than most of these games do.
Oh yeah, I never tried that one.
Yeah. So I never
Yeah.
really talked about like the big thing that we did differently in this game that most survivors like games don't do is there's a jump button. So like you don't just have your movement,
Mm-hmm.
you also can jump, which kind of helps with like
Evade.
your movement and
Yeah.
evasion a lot, and it also offers you a few different ways to attack. So like this attack triggers when you press the jump button again in the air. You slam down and hit things, and it's scaled significantly by how high you come down from. Um, so
Ah.
you're trying to synergize with like jump height upgrades, which can be helpful anyway, just to avoid stuff. Um, but they're specifically pretty helpful here. And and then we've also got this cloud upgrade, which you can see like these clouds. If I hold A after I jump, I hover around, which is
Right.
super useful for
Right.
avoiding enemies. But also in the early game, it can deal a lot of damage too. Um, the clouds kind of fall down and kill stuff beneath them. Um, so like it's kind of the ideal thing to pair with delete, so you can like position yourself over the ideal location to slam down on things. Um, so yeah, this is like another strategy in the game.
Hmm.
So I was happy that like we could kind of give the player different ways to play, and some of the strategies are better or worse depending on the map layout. So I'm glad that that kind of worked out.
Interesting.
Yeah. So do you have any other questions?
Yeah, actually, something I forgot to ask. I sort of figured it
Oh.
out. You showed me the model of the
Yeah,
virus,
yeah,
the little orb.
yeah.
Um, what about the like the lines on the cyber C and the hexagons? Is that like a separate material you added, or is that like gaps in the faces?
They're actually
Or
just the texture um, of
okay,
the that's on the models. So there's like a texture for the cyber sea that basically has like a border around the edge. Um, it's like a square
okay,
with a
okay,
border,
got
and
it.
then that square with the border is just repeated on each like quad essentially of the sea. If that makes any sense.
So is there like a part of the C that is fed from some uh like more procedural aspect, and part of it is also from the texture, or
Uh, I'm not exactly sure what you mean. I mean, I think that the sea is like it's like this. It's actually not a quad now that I'm remembering. It's like more of a it's like a square that has one vertex in the middle. Um, but
hmm,
I use those UVs. Like I use the UVs I set up in Blender to repeat this quad like over, or this very simple mesh over over the entire map. And then like the only
What I
reason
mean
they're not
is,
like really connected. Yeah.
it seems like the Cyber C has like a quality that's like a big noise texture or some or big noise function.
Right.
Not for the vertex displacement, but for like the look of the color. Like what is how does that fit in with the border from the texture? That's what I'm trying
Yeah,
to
I get
figure
it.
out.
So the color of the yeah, like the repeating noise kind of thing is like a world space noise function in the shader.
Okay.
And that gets mixed with the texture that's following the UVs of the mesh.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's what I was
yeah.
wondering
So
about. Okay.
I think it's
Cool.
something um, like the actual texture is probably like a black square with a white border, and the white
Hmm.
border it like multiplies
Got
this
it. Got
pink
it. Got
color
it.
on the edges. Yeah, and the black
Right.
part just uses like the world space noise kind of function to get that color. Um,
Got it. Got it.
but it's more
Yeah.
complicated there.
Yeah. That's
Like
what I was
the more
asking. That
complicated
makes
thing
sense.
about it is you might see there's this like you can see you can see through it to the hexes behind
Right.
it. Um,
Right.
that's a
So there's some like transparency or
yeah,
something.
it's like a transparency thing. Uh, it's actually so it has to be a transparency shader, of course, because it has to be done after all the other geometry is like all the opaque geometry for the level is drawn. But it's one of those I forget what it's called exactly. It like copies the buffer and bends it.
Hmm.
So like remember we were looking at like an explosion shader and how that would bend the look of the pixels behind it. It does the same thing here.
Hmm.
So it's got like the pixels of these hexagons, and then it bends it depending on like you can see there's like a little bit of distortion around the edges of the water here.
Right. That's cool.
Yeah. So that's like part of the reason why I
Um,
had to have my other effects in this game be not transparent. Um,
I see. I see. Yeah, that's an interesting constraint.
yeah.
Thank you for being interviewed by me, because I'm so great.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, I will talk to you later then.